Welcome to Blissfully Boring. Let's get straight into it. The year is 1348. A strange malady has swept across the continent from the east. They call it the Great Pestilence. In the city, the air hangs heavy with a sweet, cloying odor. The bells toll constantly, a monotonous rhythm marking the passage of another soul from this world. I am a physician, one of the few who dares to walk these streets. They call us plague doctors. My attire is a necessity for survival. I wear a long, waxed leather coat that reaches my ankles, thick gloves, and heavy boots. My face is hidden behind a mask, its long beak filled with aromatic herbs, thyme, camphor, mint, and cloves. It is thought that these pleasant scents can purify the foul air, the miasma, which many believe carries the disease. The glass eyepieces allow me to see, but they often fog, blurring the grim reality before me. In my hand, I carry a wooden staff. I use it to examine patients without touching them, to direct others, and to keep the desperate at a distance. My day begins at dawn. I walk through near-empty alleyways. Doors are marked with a red cross, a sign that the plague has taken root within. Silence has fallen over neighborhoods that were once bustling with life. The silence is only broken by the distant cries of mourning, or the rumbling of the death carts making their grim rounds. My first visit is to the home of a merchant. His family stands by, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and despair. The patient lies on a simple cot, feverish and weak. I see the telltale signs, the dark, swollen buboes in his groin and armpits, the dark splotches on his skin that give the disease its other name, the Black Death. My treatments are limited. The medical knowledge of our time is based on the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. We believe illness is an imbalance of these humors. My methods are crude by any standard. I might lance the buboes to release the foul-smelling pus, a procedure that is excruciatingly painful and of questionable benefit. Another common practice is bloodletting. Using a lancet, I open a vein, draining what is believed to be the excess humor. The amount of blood taken is carefully measured. Poultices made of figs and cooked onions are applied to the sores in the hope of drawing out the poison. But in truth, we are fumbling in the dark. For every patient who recovers, many more do not. I document my observations in a journal, noting the progression of the illness, the remedies attempted, and the eventual outcome. The sheer number of cases is overwhelming. The city's authorities have hired me, offering a substantial salary. Many of my colleagues have already fled or have succumbed to the plague themselves. Those of us who remain are a strange fraternity, bound by a duty that few would envy. We are both respected and feared. People make way for me in the streets, but they avert their gaze. I am a symbol of the pestilence itself. As evening falls, I return to my modest lodgings. I carefully remove my protective garments, cleaning them as best I can. The scent of herbs and sickness clings to everything. I eat a simple meal alone. The city outside my window is a canvas of shadows and flickering torchlight. The work is relentless, and the emotional toll is heavy, yet I must remain detached. To feel the full weight of this tragedy would be to collapse under it. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. More houses to visit, more suffering to witness, more names to record. I am a physician in the time of the Black Death, a witness to a world undone. My role is not to perform miracles, but simply to be present, to do what little I can in the face of an overwhelming tide. In the collective memory, the image of the plague doctor is an ominous one. A figure cloaked in black, face hidden behind a beaked mask, has become a symbol of death and despair. But what is the true story behind this haunting attire? Were these individuals harbingers of doom, or were they something more complex? To understand their role, we must first understand the world they inhabited. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, swept across Europe in the 14th century, leaving an unimaginable trail of devastation. It's estimated that it claimed the lives of up to half of the continent's population. In the face of such a catastrophic event, medical understanding was limited and largely ineffective. It was in this desperate climate that the concept of a specialized plague doctor emerged. These were not typically the most esteemed or experienced physicians. In fact, many were second-rate doctors, young physicians trying to establish themselves, or even individuals with no formal medical training at all. They were hired by towns and cities to treat plague victims, rich and poor alike. When other doctors refused, their contract was with the public, making them one of the earliest forms of a public health official. The most iconic element of the plague doctor is, of course, the uniform. However, this specific costume was not widely used until the 17th century, long after the initial medieval pandemic. It's most famously attributed to Charles Delorme, a physician who attended to European royalty. The design was based on the prevailing miasma theory of disease, which held that illnesses were spread by bad air. Every piece of the outfit was intended to provide protection. The long waxed canvas or leather coat acted as a barrier against physical contact. The wide-brimmed hat was thought to offer some defense, similar to how a modern-day hard hat signifies a worker. They carried a wooden cane, allowing them to examine patients, direct family members, and even fend off the desperate, all without direct touch. The most striking feature, the beaked mask, had a very specific purpose. The long nose cone, typically around 6 inches, was filled with aromatic herbs, dried flowers, and spices like mint, cloves, camphor, and lavender. This was not just a primitive form of a respirator. It was a defense against the miasma. The belief was that by filtering the air through these sweet-smelling substances, the doctor could avoid breathing in the corrupted vapors that supposedly carried the plague. The mask's glass eye openings were also a crucial part of the sealed head-to-toe protection. The entire ensemble created a figure that was both terrifying and otherworldly, a walking fortress against an invisible enemy. So, what did these doctors actually do? Their duties were grim. They diagnosed the afflicted, often by identifying the telltale buboes, swollen lymph nodes that were a hallmark of the bubonic plague. Their treatments, however, were based on the limited and often flawed medical knowledge of the time. These included bloodletting, a common practice for rebalancing the body's humors, and lancing the buboes to drain them, a painful procedure that could sometimes lead to further infection. They also prescribed various potions and instructed people on preventative measures, which often involved advice on diet, behavior, and quarantining. Perhaps their most important and saddest function was administrative. Plague doctors were often required to witness wills and conduct autopsies, not for scientific advancement, but for legal and civic record-keeping. They became keepers of the city's mortality count. Given the rudimentary nature of their medicine, the survival rate of their patients was not high. Moreover, the doctors themselves were at extreme risk. Many fell victim to the very disease they were trying to fight. Their contracts were often isolating, sometimes forbidding them from interacting with the general public outside of their duties to prevent further spread. They were a constant, living reminder of the plague's presence. So, were they heroes or villains? The answer is not simple. They were not miracle workers. Their treatments were often ineffective and sometimes harmful. Yet, they were the ones who stayed. In a time of overwhelming fear and abandonment, when many fled, the plague doctors walked into the heart of the suffering. They represented a sliver of hope, a sign that the community had not completely given up. They were flawed, ill-equipped, and often powerless, but they were present. They stand not as icons of medical success, but as a testament to human duty in the face of an incomprehensible crisis. Their legacy is a complex tapestry of science, superstition, and courage. In the middle of the 14th century, a devastating pandemic swept across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. It became known as the Black Death. This event, which peaked between 1347 and 1351, was one of the most fatal pandemics in human history, dramatically altering the course of civilization. The plague arrived in Europe through trade routes. It is believed to have been carried by fleas, living on black rats that were regular passengers on merchant ships. The first recorded European outbreak was in the Sicilian port of Messina in October 1347. From there, it spread rapidly, following the maritime and inland trade networks. Within months, it had reached major cities like Genoa and Venice, and by the following year it was present in France, Spain, and England. The symptoms of the disease were terrifying and swift. Those afflicted often developed fever, chills, and weakness, followed by the appearance of painful swellings, or buboes, in the groin, armpits, and neck. These were a hallmark of the bubonic form of the plague. Other forms of the disease, pneumonic and septicemic, were even more deadly, affecting the lungs and bloodstream directly. For many, the time from the first signs of illness to death was often just a matter of days. In an age before the understanding of germ theory, the cause of the plague was a profound mystery. Without scientific explanations, people turned to a variety of beliefs to make sense of the catastrophe. Many interpreted the pandemic as a form of divine punishment. It was thought that God was punishing humanity for its sins, such as greed, worldliness, and impiety. In response, some sought to appease divine wrath through prayer, penance, and religious processions. Groups of flagellants emerged, traveling from town to town, publicly whipping themselves as an act of atonement. Another widely held belief was that the plague was caused by a corruption of the air, or miasma. It was thought that foul smells from decaying organic matter, swamps, or even certain alignments of the planets could poison the atmosphere. To combat this, people carried flowers or held aromatic herbs and spices to their noses. They burned incense and fragrant woods in their homes, hoping to purify the air and ward off the sickness. Physicians, wearing distinctive bird-like masks with beaks filled with herbs, subscribed to this theory. They believed the mask would protect them from the corrupted air as they tended to the sick. Astrology also played a significant role in how people understood the plague. Medical and scientific thought at the time was closely linked to the study of the stars and planets. In 1345, a conjunction of three planets Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn in the sign of Aquarius was observed. Astrologers interpreted this celestial event as an omen of great disaster and death. The Paris medical faculty, in a report to the King of France, cited this planetary alignment as a primary cause of the deadly miasma that they believed had spread across the earth. In the search for answers, blame was often cast upon minority groups. Lacking a true understanding of the disease's transmission, fear and suspicion grew. Communities looked for scapegoats, and various marginalized groups were accused of intentionally poisoning wells and spreading the plague. These accusations led to tragic waves of violence and persecution in many parts of Europe. The medical knowledge of the era was limited. Physicians relied on ancient texts and theories that were ill-equipped to handle a crisis of this magnitude. Treatments were often ineffective and sometimes harmful. They included bloodletting and lancing the buboes, practices based on the theory of the four humors, which posited that health depended on the balance of bodily fluids. Few of these remedies had any positive effect, and the overwhelming mortality rate left both doctors and the general populace feeling helpless. Over time, some practical measures began to show results, even if the reasons were not fully understood. Authorities in some cities, like Venice and Ragusa, implemented early forms of public health controls. They established quarantine procedures, requiring incoming ships and their crews to remain isolated for a period before being allowed to enter the city. These measures, born of desperation rather than scientific insight, were among the first organized attempts to control the spread of an epidemic, and laid the groundwork for modern public health practices. The Black Death eventually subsided, but it left an indelible mark on society. It reshaped demographics, economies, and religious and social structures. The beliefs held during the pandemic reveal a world grappling with an unimaginable crisis, using the intellectual and spiritual tools available to them to explain the inexplicable. In the mid-14th century, a significant demographic shift occurred across Europe. The period known as the Black Death, lasting from approximately 1346 to 1353, resulted in a substantial reduction of the population. Historians estimate that the continent lost between 30 and 60% of its people. This event marked a turning point, not through sudden, dramatic change, but through a slow and uneven process of recovery and rebuilding that unfolded over subsequent generations. The immediate aftermath was characterized by a surplus of land and a shortage of labor. Before the plague, much of Europe was densely populated, with many people working small plots of land for subsistence, often under feudal obligations. With fewer people to work the fields, the value of labor increased. Surviving peasants and artisans found themselves in a new position of leverage. Landowners, needing to cultivate their estates, had to offer better terms to attract workers. Wages rose, and in many regions, the rigid structures of serfdom began to erode. Records from the time show a gradual shift from labor services to cash rents, giving peasants more autonomy over their work and lives. This economic realignment had a profound effect on agriculture. With more land available per person, farming practices began to change. There was a move away from intensive grain cultivation toward more diverse forms of agriculture, such as animal husbandry. Pasture land expanded, and the production of meat and dairy products increased. This not only altered the rural landscape, but also improved diets for many survivors. Archaeological evidence from the period shows an increase in the average height and general health of the population, likely linked to better nutrition. The focus shifted from quantity to quality, a subtle but significant change in the agricultural economy. The social structure also underwent a quiet transformation. The traditional nobility, whose wealth was based on land and the labor of serfs, faced economic challenges. Meanwhile, a new class of merchants, skilled artisans, and independent farmers gained prominence. The redistribution of wealth was not immediate or universal, but it set in motion a long-term trend toward greater social mobility. Wills and legal documents from the late 14th and 15th centuries reflect these changes, showing land and property being transferred in new ways, often outside of traditional family lines. Urban centers, though heavily impacted by the plague, also experienced a period of renewal. Cities like Florence, London, and Paris recovered, but their character changed. Labor shortages spurred innovation. The need for more efficient production methods led to the development of new technologies and the refinement of existing ones. For example, the invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century, while not a direct result of the plague, occurred in a world shaped by its consequences, a world with a growing literate class and a demand for knowledge that could be more widely disseminated. The process of rebuilding was not a grand, coordinated effort. It was the cumulative effect of countless individual decisions made by ordinary people adapting to new circumstances. Families moved to take over abandoned farms. Workers negotiated for better pay. Landlords adjusted their economic strategies. This period of slow recovery laid the groundwork for the economic and social developments of the early modern era. It was a time of quiet, fundamental change, where societies were not so much rebuilt to their former state as they were remade into something new, piece by piece, over many decades. The landscape of Europe, both physically and socially, was permanently altered, not by a single event, but by the long, gradual process of adaptation that followed.